So the talk for this evening is the exploration of non-judgment in the context of mindfulness. And the territory this talk will explore is as follows. We're going to set the stage. We will look more deeply at why is the topic of judgment so important? What gets judged in ourselves and others? We're going to look at the pros and cons of judging. And we're going to compare and contrast the judgment and discernment. They are different. And we'll also come to realize and see throughout the presentation that everything is always in relation to something else, and it's always balancing. We're much more of a verb than we are a noun. Words like this polar bear try to go from one place to another. And as the poet T.S. Eliot said, words strain, crack, and sometimes break. Under the burden, under the tension, they slip, slide, and perish. Decay with imprecision. Words will not stay in place, will not stay still. And part of mindful practice is to be paying attention to the gap and not so much what you think I mean by what I'm saying, but what's coming up in you. As the words jump into you and they echo in you, what is happening inside you? That's the mindful part of this, to work with the material yourself. Words slip because the map is not the territory. This is a map of the University of Calgary. And I like if you look at the cursor, here's the oval athletic, and it looks a bit like the coronavirus. And so when I was reminded of this map recently, this is sort of where we're starting. That judgment can be just a starting point for really exploring all over a huge campus and a huge territory. And so we judge things, but recognizing that the words themselves are not the territory. Remembering that we are here, and this is a good starting point. It's the only starting point we ever have. And the way we experience things, for the most part, is here and now. So mindfully just staying with, again, and I can't say this often enough in terms of core mindfulness practice, just being with the moment. Don't let your mind necessarily go off somewhere else. Mindfulness has come to North America many, many years ago, but the place where it's most described and explored is in the Buddhist tradition. And it's one of the Eightfold Path, which is the last of the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha. And the eight are divided up into wisdom, morality, and concentration. Wisdom is having the right view and the right intention to make wise decisions. Morality is about how we move in the world and relate to other people, what we say, what we do, and our livelihood. And then there are three elements to the aspects of concentration: effort, mindfulness, and concentration. We can also be aware that obviously all of us, and I'll use a lot of secular language this evening, I'm not going to get complicated. When we're mindless, we're not paying attention to what happens. We can get, for example, into a rage where we're very angry, we've got adrenaline, we're worked up. And it can be very automatic and very unwise. And we can say unwise, unhelpful, and hurtful things with our speech or our actions. The flip side of this fight or flight, and I don't want this, and rage and anger, the flip side is dopamine, which is that side of yummy, the addictive stuff. So we can either become quite justified in our rage, or sometimes we get hooked into the dopamine side, right? The addiction drug, as it were, or the addiction neurotransmitter. We're always experiencing ourselves in the world. And if we drop in a little bit into ourselves, we can at any one moment, just by a little shift of attention, Recognize that there is something that is known to me. This is knowledge. I know that I'm thinking right now. There's also the act of knowing. I am knowing this. We're a verb. And then there's also a sense that we can have of ourselves the knower. And mindfulness can actually hold aspects of all three. So I can know that I'm judging. I can label that I'm judging, or this is a judgment. I can know in the moment that I'm doing it, and I can know that I'm doing it. And so there's this aspect, perhaps, that there's all three in there. This is a reminder that this is all over Europe, the 8 spokes of the wheel that spins eternally. And these are representations of the Eightfold Path. And of course, each of these 8 is very, very important. They don't exist independently of each other. And for the purposes of description, we use words to point at something because I can't talk about every aspect at once. But remembering that all 8 spokes are important. Mindfulness does not exist separate from all these things. And this evening we're paying attention mindfully on purpose with some effort and some concentration to content of thought. John Kabat-Zinn, he's the person most credited with bringing secular mindfulness to North America. And these are his working components or functional aspects. It's not a definition. He doesn't call this a definition, but it's moment to moment. It's the only moment I'm alive. On purpose, non-judgmental awareness by paying attention. And he said the importance of this is that an awareness of my conduct and the quality of my relationships, both inwardly and outwardly, in terms of my potential to cause harm, are intrinsic elements of the culture of mindfulness. We really, really need to be careful. And he's spoken a lot and written a lot about why did he include this non-judgment. Now, he does not claim to have the final word on what non-judgment is. And we also need to remember that this stuff exists in all traditions, what is judgment, etc. And we also need to remember that even those people who are practicing the Buddhist, the traditions, we may be reading something now that was translated from Sanskrit, which was originally from Pali, and this stuff was 2,000 plus years ago. And the Buddha didn't write anything down in his own lifetime. A lot of it was an oral kind of tradition. So when we say that we know what mindfulness is, when we know what judgment is, when we know what they meant, we need to be very careful because we might be on slippery territory. Here's a moment for reflection. I'll pause again and just ask you, what do you think? What do you feel? Where does judgment live in your body? What kind of energy does it have? And do you have any other responses come up when you judge? And just to maybe write a note or two on a piece of paper, or even enter something in the chat box. We may use this as a takeoff point in the chat later, Q&A. When you look at those 3 words at the top, what comes up for you? Right here, right now. And whatever's coming up, don't judge it. Your experience is your experience. Just notice it. Become aware of it. Because it's already there. It's already in your thinking and your feeling and your body, and it has an energy. And then notice the secondary responses. You may be judging. You're judging. Or perhaps there's nothing at all that's coming up for you, and the slide is not echoing with you. That's fine too. And don't judge if you don't have an answer to these questions. What are your greatest challenges with those words? Would you consider yourself a judgy person? And if so, why? What's the content of that? Let's look at a couple of misunderstandings and pitfalls in relation to judgment. Non-judgment is not ignoring your feelings. This is a misconception that somehow I mustn't have feelings about things one way or the other. The problem with trying to do that, and non-judgment is not accepting everything without responding to it. Oh, I don't want to take sides. I want to be a nice person. I want to pretend I can be neutral. The third and the fourth bullet points. The problem with trying to be like that is you can't, because we are wired for judgment, built in. That valence, that slight liking, not liking, pushing away, clinging, attachment. And the problem is, even if we could achieve that state, which we can, that not to judge means you'd have such an open mind that your brains might fall out. And non-judgment is not easily defined. That's why I haven't tried to do it. Because as people have said, and I heard at a retreat I went to with John Kabat-Zinn, he said, the moment I open my mouth, I'm wrong. Because whatever I say is merely words pointing at some kind of experience or concept or understanding. And words always slip and slide and crack and strain and won't stay still. Why is this important? Well, a lot of our judgments, we've this evening been consciously examining our judgments. In reality, though, a lot of our judgments are unconscious. They're built into us. We've inherited them through our genetics. We've inherited judgments through our genes. We know about trauma, intergenerational trauma. We inherit ideas and stories about good and bad from our families of origin, the neighborhoods we live in, our religions, what school we went to, whether we were bullied or not. And all of these sit there working away. And if we're not aware of them, we start to believe everything. And I'm sure some of you have seen this. It was posted on the internet a couple of years ago. And it's a quote allegedly attributed to Isaac Newton, who was not the inventor of the light bulb. And he certainly did not say, if it's on the internet, it must be true. And that's actually a sketch of Isaac Newton. So we need to be careful what we believe. And there are just 100 lenses which we can use. And bearing in mind that no one lens gives us the full picture. But when we judge, it's very automatic and it just happens. And if we're not aware of our biases and our own unconscious judgments or conscious judgments, we can get into a lot of trouble. Judging is automatic, so perspective is essential to seeing right. Now, this little goodie here is called the Keyhole Nebula. And the Keyhole Nebula, that little thing has been nicknamed facetiously the finger of God. And this little thing looks quite small, but it's actually 7 light years across, and that arrow is 66 trillion kilometers. So notice your reaction on looking at these raw numbers. Notice your reaction at the shape or the comment I made. Notice your reaction to this wide pictures of the cosmos and the Hubble telescopes. For some of you, this might be boring. For some of you, it might be interesting. And just notice how there's automatically a yay or a eh. We're judging all the time. Judging lenses change. And so not only do we need to be aware of our conscious biases and unconscious biases, but some judgments are completely insignificant and others are really, really important. So something fairly neutral is a sensory judgment. I prefer a soft mattress to a medium or a hard mattress. Not a big deal. Doesn't matter. Burger or pizza tonight? Yeah, doesn't really matter. There we judge things aesthetically. This is the arts, whether it's music or visual arts or dancing or writing or poetry. And again, the judgments are just built in. And I'm using a rather extreme example, but some art of whatever kind can be very sensual. At some point, it can flow into erotic. At some point, it can be pornography. How do we decide what that is? Are there absolutes here? Who decides on those absolutes? So less about what the lines are between these three areas, for example, but more just noticing how we would very easily have our own decisions about where the gradations are. We can judge whether or not something ought to be. So right now we can think about the vaccine rollout across the planet. And we can be very judgy because we want things ought to be. It would be nice if every single country had the same rollout in a very efficient pattern. And we had 7 billion plus vaccines, all starting at the same time, and the same percentage of the population got vaccinated in every single country. So we can be very judgy about what we'd like to see. We can be very judgy, more importantly, some things start getting serious, whether things are good or bad. The ethical, right? Is it right that the rich countries on the planet are getting vaccinated first? We come here to the ethical, the important stuff, how we build our culture, our society, our relationships, what our values are. People have argued about whether true ethics, whether means justify an ends. Do the means justify the end? Is it both and? Does one take greater preference? So while I was looking up the other evening for the slide, I looked up speed limits. Now, New Zealand school zones are 40 kilometers an hour. Here in Calgary, our speed zones are 30 in school zones. Are we right? In New Zealand, wrong? What data did New Zealand decide 40? Does that mean New Zealand have got better drivers that are more trustworthy? So you notice how even in very, very simple situations, the judging is going on all the time. And that's okay, because we need to just work with it. It gets complicated. This is a judgment of Solomon on a fresco on a roof in Rome. Here's King Solomon. Here's a swords person, and the story of the two mothers both claiming that they own this baby. They are the mother of this baby, ownership. And King Solomon, in his wisdom, said, well, I can't decide. You're both claiming it's yours, so neither of you will have it. Please kill the baby. And this is his guard with a sword. And of course, the birth mother says, no, let her have it. And in that moment, King Solomon knew who the baby belonged to. And it's complicated because depending on where you're standing and looking at a situation, you're going to have a different perspective about the judgment. I'm sorry. So they're the babies, they're the guards, the mothers, the scribes, the witnesses, King Solomon himself. It's complicated. So when we look at other situations, who are we in the story here? Because it will change our judgment and our decisions. This is Willis Kilmer, who in 1918, picture was taken. He was a rich guy, And he inherited his uncle's company that made Dr. Kilmer's swamp root that claimed to guess that the well-informed know, because swamp root claimed to cure all kidney, liver, and bladder cures. And notice the swamp here, I kind of liked it because judgment is a bit like a swamp. There might be all kinds of claims you're making and holding to, but it's a bit of a cesspool and it's a little dangerous sometimes. And I like this picture here, that sometimes we guess, or we don't even slow down and recognize that our judgments might actually be a guess. And we're not looking, and we might be blinded by our own biases. And later on, if you read about it, none of the claims that this root actually helped kidney, liver, or bladder, none of those claims were true at all. The left brain tends to do all the judgy stuff and is all serious and boxed in and defined and absolute, and we believe we're right and we want it to be measured and quantitative. But the big picture is, the whole picture is the right side of the brain. It's contextual, it's relationship, it depends, it's nuanced, there's feeling, there's sense, etc. We live in a world where we're very rushed. We want to make quick decisions. We're always thinking about the future. I need to do something. And if we make mistakes, we're not good enough, and we come up with false solutions and we rush. This is unhelpful. Judging says, slow down. Let's be present. Let's come to the fullness of the moment. Perhaps we can do a good enough, and perhaps let's be a little bit more real. And this is a better way of looking at things, especially when judgments carry us off. We cannot separate being and doing. They're inseparable. The knowing, the knower, and the known. The judge, the judger, and what is being judged. We cannot separate them out because everything is contextual. The yin and the yang, the content and the process. Tonight is a lot about process, of looking at the process of judging, the being judgy, being the judger, about what we're doing or what other people are doing. Wisdom is what we should be looking for. We live in a world where we're given a lot of data and information, but we're 3 or 4 steps away from wisdom, which is doing the right thing at the right time. So we just think about the tweets and the tiny bits of information or misinformation that we get, fake news, false news, whatever, biases, right? They're profiling us on social media and search engines, and they're feeding us all of this stuff. So are we without full knowledge and discernment? Are we able to arrive at wisdom? Because everybody wants this. There's a painting called Truth and Wisdom Assist History. What gets judged in ourselves and others? Everything. We judge our own reactions. We judge our emotions. We judge our thinking. We judge ourselves, whether I'm good or bad. We can beat other people up in terms of relationship because I don't like you or I do like you. We beat ourselves up. We can deny or demonize or ignore the human spirit, our heart and our energy. And we can demonize the deepest part of our soul, that there's something wrong with me. Shame often sits here. There's something wrong with me. Look how many places in ourselves and others that we can judge. And it goes on subtly and very quickly. So we need to mindfully pay attention to every moment and notice our thoughts and our feelings and pop-ups. They're like viruses. They just pop up. Now we need to be discerning, but we need to be careful about our judgments because they can lead to unhelpful actions or helpful actions. The mindful process is what we've been practicing this evening. And in the sit, we paid attention, we became aware. We made choices of paying attention with intention to see what's going on in our mind. Because we want to get a wiser mind, take wiser action, because we're going to get a better outcome when we pay more attention. Now, this requires work. And that is the work of life, of living a life that is wiser, fuller, more life affirming, better, whatever. Pros and cons of judging, comparing and contrasting. Judgment I've put in red because we should do less of it, and discernment in green, and we should do more. Judgment, the desire of judgment is I want to have the final right answer. It often has a negative weight to it. It's often impulsive and reactive. It can often have a harsh tone. It happens quickly, automatically. There's not a lot of stopping and reflecting and thinking. It often has a very emotionally laden component. And the outcome is we can glance over things, dismiss. We can make unwise or worse decisions. And in that moment of our emotionality with something where we're judging, we're not able to separate myself and my emotions and my thoughts. This is me. I am my thought. I am my feeling. And we do that automatically because that's how we wired. And we'll often arrive at absolutes of right and wrong. And this is what's harsh and criticism. So this is just one lens of what we think about in terms of judgment. What's discernment? Well, the desire in discernment is not to feed the ego with the right answer. It's the best available solution. It's trying to find some balance or balancing. Locking down people, isolating versus economics and mental health issues. We've had this in the last year with COVID. The tone of discernment is a little gentler, it's a little slower. It involves some mental effort. Well, it should do, because we're making important decisions. We're less emotionally attached to it. We're looking for examination and appraisal, hoping that we'll get a wiser, better outcome. I can start to see the gap between judging and me. I can just start to see a thought as judging, but that thought is not me. I can separate it. It's a little bit nuanced. There's a both and. It's a little softer, and it's more about critique than criticism. Now, I believe that all of us would like to spend a little more time in the left-hand column. If anyone disagrees, let's have a chat in the Q&A in a couple of minutes. There's a story that I experienced once. A teenager got a harsh calling from a mother because the teenager's best friend came home very upset that day and complained to her mother that teenager A had hurt her feelings. So the mother said to the teenager, "What happened? You upset your friend." And the girl said, "Well, my friend asked me, do these jeans make me look fat?" And I said, "Yes." And so the mother said, "What were you thinking? How could you say that? You hurt her feelings." And the teenager wisely said, she was only about 12 or 13, she said, "Well, I had two thoughts at the same time. One was, I knew that if I said I do think the jeans make her look fat, that I'd hurt her feelings. So I really didn't want to criticize her. But I'd also been taught, Mom, by you, that I must always tell the truth, that honesty is so important. So I said I had to tell the truth. I couldn't deny my feelings. So yes, I did tell her the jeans make her look fat." The mom's anger melted because suddenly it wasn't so clear about whether or not her daughter had made the, quote, wrong decision. And the mother became aware of her judginess about what her daughter had done. So it's complicated because there's often two things going on and they may be separated by a hair. Discernment may be the best available because we're really looking for a ceasefire, because there are competing things. And if we rush to judgment at an extreme, we're trying to dominate. And these are two arrows meeting and they just touch. They're opposites, they counter. But nobody likes to lose. So there's a need for discernment. The yin-yang symbol, the dark defines the light and the dark complement each other. The yin and the yang, they don't try and dominate the one over the other. And if we just look in our culture today, and the political scene, the polarization is just not healthy. And there's just way too much generalization, way too much overreactivity, that people are so far apart. And literally people are warring with each other. Everything exists in a dynamic. I just have 1 or 2 slides left. Being and doing. We're constantly being and doing. Mindfulness helps us to pay attention to how am I being while I'm doing my doing. I haven't said anything this evening about ignoring feelings, about doing less, about tuning out, about not being responsible, about any of that. The doing needs to be done. And mindfulness brings an awareness on purpose, moment to moment. And if we can bring less judgment, we're probably going to do a better job while we're being our being. On the left is a list of ways that many of us would like to be more often in our lives, in more situations. And my acronym in the last few months, as I discovered where I was going, mine's P, B, and J. Peace, beauty, and joy. Now, I don't always find them, but I certainly try and restore balance. When do I look for peace? When I get judgy and irritable and I'm pointing fingers at myself and beating myself up. I look for some peace. And I often find that underlying my lack of peace, my war with myself or others, is because of judgment. When I see ugliness in myself or I believe that other people are ugly, I look for beauty. I try and restore a bit of this in the middle. When I'm feeling down and sad and it's terrible and the world's going to hell and nobody's good and all the politicians or whatever and blah, 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 and I feel myself sinking, I look for joy without denying the other feelings. I look for this, and these are the way I want to be. These are the doings. This is what I have to do. These are the practices. And if you notice down here, less judgment is one of the practices. I've got an acronym for my doings, which is SPK. I slow down. That's the element of discernment. The first step, slow down. When I slow down, I'm more patient and I can watch what I'm doing. I'm not in that red spirally cycle that I had in the slide there. And I'm more likely to practice kindness. I'm more likely to be discerning. Being and doing, we're a verb. We never find balance. We're constantly balancing. The tightrope walker is balancing using their hands. These two rocks are balancing each other. There's actually a dynamic there. It's not static. And being and doing are constantly talking with each other, constantly. So, mindfulness, moment to moment, on purpose, to the degree possible, non-judgmental awareness by paying attention. How am I being while I'm doing my doing? There's process and content. We all want this. We all want more helpful. In any one moment, this mindfulness can inform I, me, mine, but remembering that I'm always in a context and relationship with everything else, and I'm always in a context and relationship with you, others. And mindfulness informs all of this. I can think about me, I think about you, I think about what player am I in the court of King Solomon, because context is everything. Take home points. This is my last slide. Here are a couple of 3 acronyms, actually. This is what we've done tonight. We practiced stop, or soda, or rain. Stop, observe, detach, just step back from the judgment and just see what awakens, see what arises in you, see what comes up. As you just give yourself and set the intention to be less judgy. Stop, take a breath, observe. After you've observed, then you can proceed. The third acronym is RAIN. Recognize that judgments are going on all the time. Allow and accept them. And acceptance just means not resisting. There's no way that we cannot have a yes or no. I like this, I don't like that. You can't eliminate that built-in judgment, if I can use that word. Investigate what's going on and then see what arises and make some better choices. The Breath Project, we've already got this. I'm going to stop there. And Maya, we've got 25 official minutes. We've always said that if there's more to talk about in question period, that I'm happy to go beyond 8:30.
Thank you very much, Alan. I would like now to ask Leslie to go ahead and read out those questions in chat that popped up during Alan's presentation.
First of all, I'd like to thank Alan very much for his very interesting talk. And I enjoy the complexity of Alan's mind as presented on those slides this evening. A lot of pleasure in seeing the different branches that he has taken in exploring this topic. So Alan, I am looking forward to hearing your answers to some of the questions that are coming up. The first one is, what secondary responses come up when you judge or when one judges?
So what can happen, what I mean by the secondary judgments is we can sort of catch ourselves. I'm judgy. I'm judging whether that person has a burger or a pizza. They really shouldn't have a pizza. It's not healthy. Well, I'm judgy. The consequences of that are pretty minor if I just keep it to myself. But sometimes if I'm very judgy openly, that can cause harm. It can cause damage. I can make assumptions about the other person. And then I can feel bad that I've judged them, because everyone wants to believe that they're a nice person. So we can feel guilty about being judgy, and we can say, oh, I have to try not be judgy because I don't want to be a horrible person. So we can believe falsely. You can feel ashamed of being judgy. The attempt to be non-judgmental can come from a family of origin, where if you lived in a very judgy, critical family, you can actually go the other way in your adult life and become very laissez-faire because you don't want to inflict any judgment on perhaps a partner, perhaps your kids. So you can go the other way. So there are these other layers of trying to be judgmental or judging yourself for being judgy. But in fact, it's really important to be judgy sometimes because they're life or death decisions. And sometimes we need to accept that other judgments, other laws are there, judgments have been made, and whether I like them or not is actually irrelevant. So if I go at 60 Ks in a school zone, I will be judged by the radar, I will be judged by the judge in the courtroom, I will be judged by the police officer when she pulls me over. Now, it doesn't matter what I think about it, but I need to be very careful that when my opinion starts to get in the way of other people's rights and safety.
Thank you, Alan. There's another question here. This person says, I definitely judge people who don't wear masks. They put us all in danger. How can I not judge them for being selfish?
I definitely judge people who don't wear masks. They put us all in danger. How can I not judge them for being selfish? Great question. Let me practice what I preached. So is this walking into a supermarket? And I don't expect an answer from this person. Just as I notice what the question is. How many layers unpack for me? So is this someone who's walking into a supermarket knowing that they're violating a provincial bylaw? Is this someone who's walking on the other side of the street who doesn't wear a mask and they're walking their dog? Is it someone who's sitting on their front deck and they're 25 feet away from any passing person? So this is context. So this is context. Now, the other part there is for me to say, is the person sitting on their driveway not wearing a mask, are they really putting me in danger? I don't know. Then the question followed up, how can I not judge them for being selfish? Well, they may not believe they're being selfish. They may feel justified in their belief system. I may not agree with them, but they may not feel that they're being selfish. And remember that everybody, when I justify my own beliefs, I'm actually judging them to be right. So this person in their judgment may not be selfish. Now, I'm not agreeing. I think we should be taking a great deal of care and caution. We should be caring about other people. But it's a complicated question without a simple answer.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Another question. What do you do when your child, a young adult, keeps complaining about something? What is the best way to redirect them?
So when a teenager is complaining about something, what they're saying is, I don't like this. My first response is to look at the content of what it is they don't like. What they don't like might be unfair. It might be unjust. They may have a point. An unreasonable bedtime. You're asking your 14-year-old to go to bed at 7 p.m. Good luck. So depending on what it is, you can look at the content and have an open conversation, because it depends what they're complaining about. They might actually be justified in complaining about it. They may have a better judgment on the situation than you do. So we need to be very careful about judging that complaining is a bad thing. In fact, most of human progress has been based on complaints that things are not fair or just. The second aspect on this question is that having decided or having a conversation with a teenager and realize that perhaps what they want doesn't exist or that it's not negotiable, you can have a conversation with them about not trying to negotiate the non-negotiables. Safety and responsibility are not negotiable for parents. They will not let their kids. But everything else, if it's not illegal, immoral, or life-threatening, which are judgments we need to make, and even those are gray areas sometimes, we need to step back and say, I wonder if my kid's got a point, and not just judge the complaining as necessarily bad. And if you've got any thoughts here, Leslie, as a teacher yourself, please add in.
Okay, I will if I feel like there's something really important, but there's several questions popping up, so I'm going to keep going. Okay. What is the difference between judgment and feedback or opinion?
Judgment is the process. Feedback or opinion is content. There can be a line there, I believe, it's only one answer of many perhaps, that feedback is about the content. So, if we stick to the content, we can actually give feedback without being very judgy about it. Without being judgy about it. And so I see there the differential is more judgment as process, which is most of the talk was tonight. And then feedback is just a piece of content or opinion.
Mm-hmm. And often I would add that it's much easier to receive when it's delivered as an opinion or feedback rather than receiving a judgment can feel like somebody is telling you how you are rather than a perspective being delivered.
And then we can take that very personally and get defensive, and we can fight back and argue and dismiss and so forth. And we miss the pearl in the feedback.
Yeah. All right. Should we attempt to control these secondary judgments? And there's more here. I feel as though that to be a good person, we cannot have these bad thoughts on other people and ourselves at all. Is it reasonable to think this way, or should we learn to accept these thoughts and not pay too much, or not pay attention too much as they arrive?
So there's a couple of parts in there that resonate for me. And again, I'd invite people to really, really sit with their own questions later on and then add in whatever Leslie or I have to add. I don't label thoughts as good or bad. A thought is a thought. It's an arising. It's a secretion of the mind. It's a cloud that passes across my awareness. I don't use the word good or bad. And you notice this evening, I didn't use the word good or bad or positive or negative once, because those have hidden connotations in themselves. We are judging the thought, and I don't want to not pay attention to them. That's the second part of the question there. I actually want to pay attention. I don't want to dismiss them. I want to pay attention to my thoughts and my feelings, because I want to then see if they are helpful, productive, nourishing, affirming, collaborative, joyous, etc. So notice in the question there, and we all do this, oh, that's a bad thought. Right? I'm not picking on the questioner here, but just notice your use of the word bad, and what do you mean by bad? And what kind of energy does it have? And then the secondary thing that happens there, oh, I don't want to have bad thoughts, so I don't want to pay attention to them. No, mindfulness is the opposite. You want to pay attention to them because it's actually impossible not to have them. They just pop up all the time.
Okay. I would also add that when we practice mindfulness, we'll often find that it helps to thin out our tendencies towards negativity over a long period of time. And so just by itself, the frequency of those thoughts may diminish. And also there's practices like loving kindness that help to soften up the heart and tend to produce more pleasant ways of looking at things, more forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sometimes a person is judged negatively based on someone else's beliefs and perspective about them. This could cause them to lose their job, feel shame, or such. Is there anything healthy one can do to avoid this?
I'm not quite sure of the accurate intention of this question. So, and I don't know the context of this question. And I'm just having a best guess here. So yeah, I might hear something about somebody else and believe them. That's why we shouldn't gossip, engage in gossip or listen to gossip or whatever. So based on someone else's beliefs and perspectives about them. Yeah, this is why we should always try and filter our words through 3 filters. Is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? If it's not kind, if it's not true, if it's not necessary, I need to pause for a moment and ask myself, do I need to say this? Will it add something to the silence? Will it improve on the silence? So that's really the first sentence there. Wow. Yeah, because there can be significant consequences to saying things about people and about people. So the healthy thing is to avoid gossip. Sometimes the bystander in gossip should say, you know what, I don't want to be part of listening to this conversation. If you two want to talk about person so-and-so, you go ahead, but I'm stepping back. The bystander can actually help in this whole process, because that's healthy, because you don't want somebody else's opinion about somebody else to get in the way.
Okay. So this is a statement that someone's made, and maybe you have a comment on it. Sometimes the judgment isn't to judge all the time, but to let others own their consequences.
Context is everything. I agree with that comment, depending on the context, absolutely. So, I might let my teenage kids fail a test and not study, and fail the test and have to deal with their teacher and figure out their relationship to their own education. But I wouldn't just let my 4-year-old dash into the middle of the road without yanking their arm, even if it means risking dislocating their shoulder. So the mindfulness, it's always contextual. That statement is absolutely true. But in both cases, we're making a discerning decision. We're judging or discerning that to let my teenager fail a test and work with a school teacher and figure out that no effort has consequences, I might let them fail, as it were, but I won't let my 4-year-old step into the road. So thank you for that nice little statement, which has got so many layers into it.
Mm.
And the nuances come into the sometimes. But either way, in either of those two situations, you're still making a discernment. You're still making a decision to not step into your teenager. You're making a decision to grab the 4-year-old's hand.
Okay. Another statement, which maybe you can comment on. When I remove the element of contempt from my judging, then I'm just assessing. This allows me clarity without shaming.
Yeah, contempt has got a very harsh, critical flavor to it. Contempt is absolute dismissal. It's looking down your nose at something. It's dehumanizing somebody else. That's what contempt is. And yes, by removing contempt, we don't have that heaviness, that emotional dislike or hatred. And people can have contempt for themselves, as I pointed out earlier on in that one slide about all those things that can get judged. One of them was the self and others. And so we can be contemptuous towards ourselves. We can beat ourselves up. We can believe, as you said, Leslie, that we have this capability of really doing damage to ourselves. And we can soften in our relationship to ourselves. I don't need to be contemptuous. We can offer loving kindness, as you said. We can offer loving kindness to judgment. I know you're having a hard time, judgment. This is all you know how to do. So I feel sorry for you, judgment. I know you don't mean me harm. I know you don't mean others harm, but can I help you soften yourself so that you're not walking around so angry all the time?
I was reading, I'll just make a comment in addition. I was reading about the different parts of the brain that light up when we have someone in the friend category versus someone in an enemy category. And how we tend to be so much more forgiving for someone who we think like is in our tribe, someone who's in our tribe. We're willing to help them, support them, and forgive them for things that they do that we don't like. Whereas if we've categorized someone in the enemy, or not my tribe, then it's much more likely that we will judge them negatively. Which doesn't mean you don't judge yourself and you don't judge your friends, but there's a difference tends to be difference in the percentage points in which we engage in judgment.
Yeah. I've had a look at that comment. Oh, yeah.
You want to go on that one?
Judging involves trying to see the other person's point of view. Absolutely. This touches on the recognizing humanity in everybody else. That yes, the world is a better place when we offer ourselves forgiveness and others. I've got an interesting example that popped up. This is a good moment for this. When we think about the lobbying about guns, both ways, the pro-gun lobby, the anti-gun lobby, anti-firearms, they seem to be at polar opposites. So the folks who are pro-gun believe they have a right to defend themselves and their families. It's a right to have it. Only the bad people should have their guns taken away, etc. The anti-gun lobby says, well, no, you don't have a right to do that. But actually, both groups are wanting the same thing. They're just going about it differently. Both the anti-gun lobby and the pro-gun lobby want to feel safe. This is the humanity, our common humanity. They're just going about it in completely different ways. So they think they're on opposite sides of the argument, and the argument never goes anywhere because the underlying need is not being addressed, the need to feel safe. Pro-gun say, if I have a gun, I can defend myself. The anti-gun lobby say, if there aren't any guns around, I don't need to worry about them in the first place. But both want the same thing. So this doing unto others as you want them, bringing this balance in, not being so judgy, recognizing that the other side wants just the same thing as I do.
So the next comment is important to acknowledge and understand who you are such that you know what is bias or what can be measured as fact. But then your perspective of the fact with its biases.
Yeah. They say that know thyself, to thine own self be true. This is what mindfulness is about, going right back to the start of this evening when I started the presentation. I spoke about going inwards. It's so important to know who you are so that you can uncover the biases. We may be aware of our conscious biases, unconscious. What can be measured as fact? There's another whole conversation here, but there's a difference between fact, truth, and belief. And often in conversation, people conflate the three, but they're very different. I don't want to get into that now in the interest of time. So the comment here about fact can be biased. Well, it depends what you mean by fact. Because fact is not always informative of truth. And belief is not always based on truth. And fact does not always back up belief. And I think part of the division in the political discourse in our society, in these times of turmoil, is people conflate the three. They believe they're talking fact when they're actually talking belief or opinion. You can have a raw fact, but it tells you nothing about truth.
Okay, so the final question here. How can we help someone without judging? What kind words can we say? Beautiful.
You are right at the doorway of that slide which I moved through. The questioner will answer their own question. So that slide I went through, mindfulness as process, you become aware and you're making a choice to use kind words. You've just set that intention. Listen to what kind words are wanting to be spoken to this person. I don't have the answer because I don't know the exact context that this person is remembering or thinking about. But for the questioner, please stay with your question and you will have your own answers to that beautiful question. What kind words can I say to them? The moment you set that intention, that's why one of the Eightfold Path is wise intention. And then that leads to wise thought. It leads to wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood. And then you bring in the three: mindfulness, effort, and concentration. You will have the right answers because your hand is right on the door of wanting to say something nice, because that is showing discernment in a situation where you have the choice of being very judgy or being a little kinder and slowing down. That might be a great question to finish up on.
Yes. Thank you very much, Alan, for that wonderful talk. And also thank you to the listeners for the very interesting questions and for the answers that Alan shared with us. So I look forward to seeing all of you again, or any of you that can make it, to our next talk with Dr. Phil Bluestein, again on the breath, and that's on March 18th. And a reminder that you can find all of the talks on our website, the WTM website, and many other resources on there as well. I'd also like to again thank the Calgary Public Library, in particular thanking Maya for her support of our presentation this evening. And I hope you have a restful and enjoyable rest of your evening at home.